everyone. Welcome to another episode of Convos with Sazón with yours truly, Cata Mejía. With me today is Luz Maria Mack. She is a Dominican children's book author. Bienvenida. How are you?
Good.
I am so excited to have you here. As life would have it, I actually heard about your work months ago from someone very close to me who had happened to walk by one of your book readings at the Mess Cloisters. So when you reached out, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is her. And I love the work that you do, and we'll dive into it. But first and foremost, I want to talk about your early beginnings. Think back to your childhood, your upbringing. I know that you're a proud Dominican. So tell me about that. How has your upbringing influenced the work that you decide to do now? At an early age, were books important to you? Was storytelling something that, you were surrounded by? Or was this something that came along later in life?
Well, thank you for mentioning I'm a proud Dominican, because that's like everything about me just oozes it. But so books really came to me later in life. This was not something I thought I wanted to do. Is like, people go to school for certain tracks in life. I thought I wanted to be like a social worker, and from that, I thought I wanted to work in healthcare and do healthcare administration. But books really touched my life when I had children. My daughter, when she was 3 years old, she got accepted into this private school in the Upper West Side. I picked her up one day and she asked me, "Mommy, can you dye my hair blonde?" And that was like the question that really just like kind of like made me start thinking about the world around us. Like what is going on that our kids don't see themselves, but most importantly, why did that question like really like just like grind my gears? Like, what's going on? So I started thinking about like all the animations that I grew up watching, I actually, I thought about Topollillo, like the little mouse with the blonde hair.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Like something like that, or Rainbow Bright, The more I thought about it, I'm like, okay, so none of them look like me,
Or your family.
or my
your
community,
community.
or like Gem, or obviously I'm dating myself. I'm like mentioning all these cartoons I grew up seeing, but then my daughter was like really intentfully asking me a question about how can she feel like she fit in, and that's what I gathered from that. So I started looking for books that represented the Dominican culture. I thought about, are there books that capture my love for mango trees? Obviously, we live in New York City, but like books could capture that. Those stories could be told. Or like there's books about El Campo. No, I mean, that time it was 2015, so I didn't see anything. And although I was looking for those books, little did I know, I was kind of like telling her the stories of my childhood, but not knowing that I could become a writer just because of that. So I started telling her, like, I grew up like this, I grew up like that. And I was mentioning Dominican Republic that has changed a lot and has evolved. As many people know, Dominican Republic is like top in tourism and it's changed, and there's buildings now, not like big skyscrapers like New York City, but like, it's evolved. It's not the Dominican Republic I grew up in, but like I was able to communicate that with her verbally, not only with her, but with her sister, her older sister. And that's what led me to start creating stories. But it wasn't because...
It was in the books.
Yeah, it wasn't in the books. Exactly. Well said.
So, I mean, I love that it's so personal to you, which has two sides of that coin, right? I'm sure it was shocking in the moment. But had it not been for that, you might not have identified a gap that impacts so many like us,
Yes.
And I know that prior to landing in New York, or in that process, you came to Inwood first and
Yes.
then the Bronx, both areas in New York that are constantly evolving as well. So I love that you turned to storytelling first to try to share your lived experiences with your daughter, and also kind of marry the two worlds of eres de allá y de acá. You have kids who were born here, but that doesn't mean that they're any less Dominican, or they can't appreciate or relate to things that they can hear about, And I think that is the power of books as well. They're windows to the world. They tap into our imagination, I love reading, if you can't tell.
Yeah.
And I think that at an early age especially, it really can plant the seed that anything is possible, and there is so much more beyond what we know to be true or what we've experienced. I would love to also know how that transition from the Dominican Republic to New York affected you personally. You know, what were you juggling at the time? Why did you make the decision to make the move? And then how did you take those learnings and apply them to your family life as well as you were raising kids?
Yeah. So when my mother and father came to this country, my dad is a Vietnam vet. So when he got married to my mother, he had a really hard time um, bringing my mother to this country. So my mother made a very difficult decision that many parents do. She left me and my sister, my younger sister, with my grandmother. So we were there for, I want to say, less than 2 years. And that 2 year period, while we were in Dominican Republic, my dad was working in a bodega, you know. My mom was trying to acclimate to New York City, like not only the environmental changes of not being surrounded by community and the language, you know, but Inglewood at the time was like predominantly like Irish and Albanian and white. We were like the first Hispanic family in the building that we grew up. Wow. And I really don't talk about it that much because I think like one of the hardest things was when my mom actually brought me and my sister there. She had a very hard time. My mom is like very fair skin, green eyes, very, you know, like she assimilates well, if you know what I mean. But when she speaks, like it was very noticeable. My siblings also are more fair skin. I had like an afro. I came in looking very, you know, chocolatica. So, you know, when my mom was learning English and I moved to Inwood, one of the first questions a neighbor asked her, oh, this one is a little black. And that that really shocked my mother. Although, you know, I was too young to understand what that concept meant because I came to this country like when I was 6 years old. Wow. Although my daughter started identifying like race and culture at a younger age, it's different. I didn't understand the language. I was like assimilating. I grew up being surrounded by family constantly. So my mom is one of 11 children.
Oh, wow.
You know?
Wow.
And there's another 11 on the other side because I guess grandpa, you know, had
He
a
was
lot.
busy.
He had a lot of love to give. Like too much love. And there were so many cousins. And I think like that was the thing that like really like pushed me. Like I knew like my husband is African American. My kids are half African American and Dominican. I'm raising my kids completely different from how I grew up, you know? I don't get to see my family so often because now we're all scattered about. But that was one of the reasons when I started thinking about how I grew up. It was very different. So from Inwood and assimilating there, learning English, I really didn't learn English till I went to college. I didn't really need to. And I hate saying that. Yeah. I went to bilingual schools, so my dominant language was Spanish at the time. And then when I went to college, I had to learn English. Like there was no escaping it. It was like English 1,000%. So I went to Brigham Young University, a small satellite because I grew up Mormon. I went to a small satellite in Idaho, and like that really helped. But like I kind of saw like the different side of our country, you know, and it made me question about who I am. Race came up into effect, and I started realizing that no matter where you go, you have to be yourself, and that is the truest message I could share. You have to be yourself. You have to love the skin you're in. You have to love everything that made you who you are. But that's hard. Like that doesn't happen overnight. That happens over and over again. So when Chloe asked me, my younger daughter asked me like, can I dye my hair blonde? I knew like this was going to be the one of many moments that I had to show her that like self-love, reminding her of like the long line of people she came from that make up who she is. Because, you know, my children grew up here, and I think I mentioned it when we were talking. Like, imagine coming from Dominican Republic. I grew up like seeing all kinds of homes that didn't have floor or bathrooms. They had outhouses. To like my children having the luxury of growing up in New York City, going to private schools, And not only that, but like being a part of like this beautiful fabric of our community, that they get to see all types of individuals, not just Dominicans, but they still, I want them to have that pride of like the communities they come from.
Of course. And it starts in the household,
It's,
as you were mentioning,
yeah,
that conversation that Chloe brought up, like
yeah,
you said. I mean, even though you had experiences with race and identity previously,
yeah.
you're not really taught as a parent,
Mm-mm.
first of all, how to parent. That's number one. And then also number two, how to navigate these conversations,
Yes.
even though you can relate, And so credit to you and power to you, for seeing that as an opportunity. And I can't help but acknowledge the fact that even though the environment around you is constantly changing, because of the power of community and how your values were so deeply instilled in who you were able to find your ground. And passing that along to your kids, like the stories that you shared, the morals and the values that you pass along. And I'm sure it's a continuous effort, of reinforcing that.
Yes.
And as they grow up, we all become our own people, but our pillars are really what we're taught in the household. And that support system of family or community and chosen family is really what holds us down. I want to ask a little bit about your college experience, because you mentioned going to college,
Yes.
and you had a reaction when I brought it up. So I want to hear about the
God.
reaction, and I also want to hear about, because being an author wasn't in the books, what did you decide to pursue, and what were your plans at the time when it came to applying what you went to school for?
Yeah, so I have to mention, like, I was the first one to go to college.
Oh, wow.
So that's why I kind of like I didn't have anyone that went to college, and said like, okay, when you go to school, like, and I actually lived that experience again, sending my oldest to college. She's at Temple now. And me and my sister were laughing at everything we didn't like. We were so underprepared for college. It was so underprepared. And I'm not like embarrassed about it, because I'm sure it was tough on my parents. Like, I'm going to send my kids to college, not know what happens, but I know they need to learn something. Like, that was like probably what my mom was thinking, as I know her so well. But I went to college, and then I did not do well in high school. My kids know that. I didn't do well at all. I wasn't very motivated in school. I graduated from John F. Kennedy High School, which was known back then as like one of the worst schools in the system. It was so bad. It got broken apart. Like, they disbanded the school and made lots of little smaller schools. And that was my zone school. And I attended that. And that's why I said I didn't really need to speak English. And I graduated a high school system, not really speaking English like a lot, and like everything in Spanish. And I was able to be successful in high school enough to get my high school diploma. And then when I got accepted into college, and it was through like my faith school, if you kind of say it like that, I really didn't I didn't know what I wanted to. I didn't like. Every student was partnered with a guidance counselor, and I still remember back then the guidance counselor was like not very motivating about me attending school. But when I think now as an adult, Kennedy, so most people don't know this, when you go to Kennedy High School in the Bronx, the admitting student body is over 2,000 students.
Oh, wow. That's pretty big for a high school.
Yes, it is. I'm talking about over 8 blocks. It is huge. It was the biggest high school. It was known for its baseball and football. It wasn't very known for its academics back then. And if it was, I don't recall. I do remember it was known for some major parties. But and they did a lot of like fun stuff. But I went to that school, and its admitting class was a lot smaller. My admitting class was less than 900 students. I still remember.
Wow.
It was so
the
big.
Graduation rate
was
was
low.
interesting, yeah.
It was low for a reason. It wasn't doing good, and it was one of the first schools with a metal detector. So I'm setting up the stage so you understand, like, everything was stacked against me not to succeed. So when I went to this college, I took it as a fresh opportunity. I had a scholarship. I was forced to speak English 24/7. I didn't understand how little of the world I knew until I went to college. So the experience was not only shocking, this conversation of community took a different form because there was no community. You were making community, and then the people that you kind of knew because you grew up seeing, and they're in that college, they're trying to figure it out too. So school was very different, and you're in a small classroom trying to figure things out. So when I graduated BYU, Idaho, I was so happy because I wanted to be back home. I miss arroz habichuela. I miss not only the food, I miss the people.
And Idaho is very different than New York and much more different than the Dominican Republic.
Yes, I have to admit, like there was less than 5% of diversity, and that's accounting for Spanish, just like general Spanish, Black, African American. There were a lot of people from Tonga and things like that. So that was like the experience I had. And when I went to school, I went for the arts because I didn't know what I wanted to do. I knew I loved the arts, and that's what I did. And then after that, I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. So I went to University of Central Florida, but eventually I made it back home to New York City, and I graduated from City College. I got my psychology degree. Wow. Before I finished my psychology degree, I was working in healthcare because I knew I wanted to be in healthcare. And then I lasted over 10 years in healthcare. But that's how it went. I had no idea. No one telling me, do this, there's scholarships in this. And I think that was kind of like once I became a parent, I kept telling my children, and I think my husband and I and his family are very adamant of telling them, like, no one's gonna love you or give you the best advice like the people in this household, because the entire world is gonna like not give you guidance. So we wanted to set up something different for them. So my husband graduated from private schools, so we put them in private schools, very different community environment. They're getting a lot of more resources, they're getting a lot of more connections. And then my oldest daughter, Andrea, I was so nervous about her applying for college, and this is where I'll bring it back to college, that I was like, no, you have to look at schools with me online. Like, I was just so nervous because I just kept thinking about everything I didn't have. And it was just that. I didn't have that. But before like her mid-year of senior year, she already knew like about 20 colleges she wanted to apply for. That's a big difference.
And let me tell you, the college application process in this country is so demanding. It is very different than our countries. My parents went to college back in Colombia, and they're very, well educated, fortunately, both formally and otherwise. But I was kind of like their guinea pig in terms of what is college apps? What is the SAT? How does the the supplemental essays? I don't know how much of this is still relevant, but at the time, and this is no shade to them because I know that they were doing everything and more with what was available, And I try to put myself in their shoes. Y yo no sé cómo lo hacen, and I say that all the time. But I was, yes, a daughter, and simultaneously I was almost a parent too, because we were navigating this together, and a lot of things that you would normally look up to your parents to when it came to this application process, it was both of our first time. So we were learning together, So speaking to what you were saying of not having much guidance, I had a lot of guidance in other components, but in this particular experience, we were both kind of seeking the same guidance because they hadn't been familiar with the process before. Now, with my brother, it was different because ya lo vivieron conmigo. Not that it was easy by any means the second time around, but they already knew roughly what to expect.
Yeah, but they understood. And by the way, when I was doing college, like 2 years later, my mom was doing school too. And she decided to get her, her degree. She got it in Spanish, and she became a teacher much later in life after cleaning bathrooms in this country. And so that's the thing. Like, I was the first. And while I was the first and got my associates, my mom was trying to figure out life, and she was doing that. And then to go from all of that, like, chaos of understanding this country, understanding systems without guidance or assistance. My daughter, I was like so paranoid because I'm like, okay,
It's coming.
It's coming. I was like, like the painting of the pitchfork with the old lady.
Yes.
Like it brought all my grades. I'm like, we're ready for this. Let's combat these paper. She's like, Mom, what are you talking about? We have an additional class to help us with the college essays. I'm like, really? Well, I don't.
Nice.
I'm like, I don't trust what you're talking about. Let me
Right.
see that. And then there was an additional class through the school she was attending to help her. I think it was with like I forgot what it was, so I don't want to misquote, but it was something else to help her. And she decided she was gonna opt out of it. I'm like, tú estás loca. Ya tú vas. We already paid tuition. You're going to that.
Yeah.
So she was so prepared. Like I said, she applied for 25 schools. The SAT was like, she took the SAT, but like the schools didn't even look at that because her year was the first.
Times are different.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Times are so different because her year was the first. I think it was the second year where SATs like some schools don't really. Didn't even look at it. And then she had some great offers. I mean, there was not much financial assistance, but she has some great offers. And when she went to school, it's like my husband's family like just banded together. This woman had like furniture stuff available and like everything for her kitchen. She had boxes and el carrito no cabía más mierda for mudanza. She had to go with this huge mirror because she's like it was almost like a vanity mirror. She's like, oh, because when I go out and like again,
Growing up.
it was like such a shock because me and my sisters were like, yo, what did you have? I'm like, I left with one suitcase and I had un plato wrapped un plato, a fork, a spoon, and things. It was like, but then I had to remember, we really had struggles,
Yeah. And everybody before us contributes to the successes of both ourselves and our future generations. So your daughter is a success story, I would say. The first of many, because you do have additional children and you're also doing so many other things for yourself. And it's a direct reflection of you taking your circumstances, making the most of them, and also learning from them, right? And so I think that's beautiful. I would love to also know how your lived experiences and also the loved ones in your life have influenced the types of stories that you decided to write and the characters that you created as well.
Yes. So when Chloe asked me that she wanted to be blonde, I started with like the most simpler version of my life in Dominican Republic. So I started creating Pequeña Maria, Little Maria. And if you see, this is actually a bundle. These are three books in one. I actually like highlighted a lot of my life growing up in Dominican Republic. So one of the books share like all of Maria's favorite things to do, which is climbing mango trees. I really didn't climb it. It was my sister. I was scared of climbing stuff, but I will make her climb it and be like, tumba el mango más grande, el más bonito, you know? La galería, like being on the porch with family. I think one of the fondest memories I have of DR is like it was late at night, all the family would gather around La Galeria. They'll tell just jokes and stories all night long, and I will fall asleep to that chatter. And I think it's one of the reasons why I wanted to capture that so much, because I know it's changed. It's changed, and it is something of my life. Like, I guess I wanted to memorialize as much as possible. And also some of the love I had about like playing hide and seek or learning like the most basics of like things about how to keep your house like a little piece of heaven. That my mom is very religious, so she used to say keep your house like a little piece of heaven. So I still remember learning how to wash dishes with dos bateas de agua. One for like the clean stuff that you clean and you rinse off, and then the other. So again, a lot of that is capturing that. I had no idea that me putting that in a book, like it was going to relate to other people that are not Hispanic, you know?
And Maria is in my earrings that you so very generously gifted me. And I also can't help but call out the fact that she has natural hair.
Yes.
And it is not flat ironed. It is not styled in any way that isn't more natural to her. And I think that's beautiful as well, because as we speak about representation, which is such a hot topic and it's so important to continue talking about it, you know, you are part of the solution, right? But it can't just fall on you as one author. There is a lot of work that needs to be done.
A lot more.
And again, you're part of the solution. We're working towards that. But what would you say are the gaps that you've identified in this process of work that still needs to be done, conversations that still need to be had, not only when it comes to race and religion at times as well, but also abilities, right? All of those tough conversations that we're faced in the world that we live in today.
So it's important to note that when I started writing in 2015, the lack of representation in books was under 4% that represent Latinos. And I believe it was under 9% that represents African Americans. And the reason I focus on those two cultures specifically, because those are the cultures I try to highlight. And when African Americans are highlighted, they create ways to represent other communities, especially us as Latinos. So when we say under 4% was highlighted, that means there's 22 countries in Latino America, so we have less than 1% that is highlighting a Dominican, a Puerto Rican, a Cuban, a Venezolano, Brazil, the list goes on. So that was 2015. Then George Floyd happened. Then there was a call to action about we need more diverse books. Publishing decided to give more opportunities to, underrepresented voices. But what happened now? The pendulum switch. Now there's books being banned. There's not a lot of opportunities for diverse voices, and stories are not getting picked up. The good news is people are becoming indie publishers because they understand that they need to control the narrative and create the stories that are being shut down. So that's the good news. And because of those gaps, that means you have less chances of seeing stories through publishers that represent someone like, I think I was mentioning, I was writing a story that highlights my cousin, that she's half Dominican, half Asian. She's Chinese. My dad is part Chinese, and people were like, when I pitched it to publishers, some of them turned it down because they really had a hard time believing that those people are from my family. And also, one of my biggest achievements recently that I'm very proud of is that one of my books was converted into Braille, and that's still in the process. But if we think there's a lack of representation of our cultures, imagine for kids that have a lack of resources that need Braille books. It's even less. And I had no idea how less. So that really provides an opportunity for kids to have access to books. And then the biggest fact of all, when we look at the illiteracy gap, it hits harder Latino and Black students more than anyone. And there was a documentary stating that a lot of the individuals that are in jail are illiterate. So they were tying the illiteracy gap to crime and other things. And I thought that was sad. Not only was it sad because we are really not thinking about how not learning how to read doesn't create opportunities, but we're also not knowing how not learning how to read actually just makes your life less successful, less happiness. I think it's a blessing that we have the opportunities of being able to afford a book, or even have free resources as book videos that you could see on YouTube for free, or a library. But even some of those, people don't have that, or don't even think about that, or don't have an adult that is guiding a child to look at those. And I think that's the biggest sad story, not having that type of a person that is
Absolutely.
helping them.
I know, as you talk about all these facts and figures, which if you ask me, they are much lower than they should be, how would you say that created even more of an urgency for the types of stories that you've decided to focus on? And I ask because you've also shared with me off camera that in your pitching process, you've pitched to really big names like Netflix, like Nickelodeon, and you were faced at the time with responses like, oh, we don't need this. We already have Dora the Explorer or something like that.
Yeah,
It's like, we
yeah.
already have one. We can check that off, on to the
Yeah.
next, So what was that like to be on the receiving end, knowing the information that's out there, knowing the urgency, having lived it, but also seeing it from the community around you?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that because it never really clicked to me until I started connecting with other creators. Like, yeah, I create books, but a lot of the books I animate. But when I started meeting with those creators, that's when I learned the facts. Dora the Explorer was not created by a Latino person. It was created by someone that's not from our community. I believe Duck McStuffin as well, and Rosie's Rule was not created by a Latino person. So I started seeing like all these characters that are used as tools for educational purposes or highlighting Latino culture or African American culture, were not created by anyone from the culture or authentically by us. So we have never been saying our stories.
And it's almost like these characters are performative, right? It's like they're being used by big names to say,
Yes.
we've covered our diversity requirement.
Check,
or
check.
we can say that we're doing all the right things. And then if you look behind the scenes, just like you just mentioned, okay, who's really at the table making these decisions? Who is the one writing these stories? Because ultimately, on a surface level, yeah, it might look like you or I. They might maybe have one or two experiences that are relatable, but there are so many deeper nuances and narratives that are
yes.
so important to talk about and to normalize as well, and that goes hand in hand with what I was saying in representation. It isn't just, oh, they look like me. It's, oh, I can relate to that lived experience.
So you know what happened recently that I share with you? I think it was a couple of months ago. I don't know if it was Disney. It was one of these platforms that creates cartoons for kids. And I'm going to mention this because I forgot to mention this to you in our conversation. There was a cartoon that was showing a little girl singing a song about Dominican Republic. And it got like a lot of likes, a lot of shares, and things like that. And everyone was like, I'm so happy. They finally nailed it. Someone's showing El Campo, someone like in a little cartoon for a little girl, this and that. But when you look at the creators or who created the song or the episode, no one's from our culture. And people are like, so what? Why does that matter? Well, it kind of matters. It matters a lot, actually, because let's go back to Dora. And I think I gave you this exercise. If you type, how much is the Dora Explorer IP worth? It's in the billions. Yeah. So who has the economic opportunity? The voice. And who's giving off opportunities? And don't tell me just because we're hiring some Latino creators that is enough, because I'm sure many of them have great ideas for stories that are just not being told.
And it's also the idea of others profiting from our culture,
yes,
and our people, and it not being given back to the people who it's meant to be for. So there is a much bigger conversation there as well.
Yeah.
I know that you've also mentioned that even though there is some representation, the impact of not having authentic voices behind the work also leads to diluted stories.
Yes.
Talk about that. First of all, what does that mean to you? And also, how do you take that as additional motivation to make sure that the stories that you do decide to share aren't diluted? They're quite the opposite and really hint and showcase that authenticity behind it all.
So thank you for saying diluted stories, because it's something that's, I really believe, is happening in many spaces. You could get picked up by a publisher, but if you're still kind of like a small author, your story is going to get changed like a bunch of times. Sometimes it'll be better. Sometimes you'll be like, wow, a lot is missing. A lot is missing of what I wrote, or a lot is missing of like what I meant by that, you know? And it's just the name of the game. But if you're a bigger author, like I don't want to quote any name, but like if you're a big personality, I'm pretty sure chances are if someone makes a change in your story, and you say, I don't like that, that's not what I meant, I kind of like
They'll
the
respect it.
They'll respect it, but you have that weight, right? You have that weight. I think for me, it meant a lot when this story, The Secret of the Plátano, was my first traditionally published book, and I got with a small indie publisher that got picked up and acquired by a bigger publisher, I think that moment not only made me so happy, but it was happy because my story was still my story. It didn't get, nothing was changed. And they respected that I wanted the grandma to look the way she does because she looks like my grandmother, the person that, raised us. Because
That's
when I was
beautiful.
pitching this story, I pitched it over 75 times and then it finally found a home. I want people to understand this pitching process, it doesn't,
It's
it
not
does,
for the weak.
it's not for the weak. And sometimes you cry and beat yourself up at night, but like if the story is the story and it means a lot. And to me, what meant more is keeping the character that this story is an homage to my grandma is that it looks like her, that it looks like the things I wanted to capture, you know. I wanted to capture plátanos. I wanted to capture my grandma who always has a bandana over her head, covering her hair with the big glasses, you know.
Beautiful.
But when I had pitched it to other people, they didn't like grandma's look. They didn't like some of the story, so they wanted to change it. And to me, that was a little nerve-wracking because I was like, no, the story, then it won't capture this or then it won't capture that. And I always say, like, you should have the conversations and hear people out. This book got an award. I don't know if it would have gotten an award had I not stuck to my guns.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
And talk about that, sticking to your guns and that process of maybe entering a field in which you're new, right?
Yes.
You don't necessarily have experience. There is a lot of self-doubt, I'm sure,
Oh.
because you want to succeed, and of course you're doing things with your heart, but if you're faced with backlash or pushback or resistance of any sort, you're also human. That can get to you at times and be like, maybe they're right. And so talk about what that process has been as you've evolved as an
Yes.
author as well, of really believing in the work that you're doing and standing your ground because you know that it's much bigger than yourself as well.
Well, yeah, I have to admit, I still like beat myself up over like not being open to a lot of changes or hearing the changes and being like, well, don't we have a story like that? Don't we have a story that we show a grandma that doesn't look like my grandmother, for example,
Yeah.
or a story that's not in an environment that is like donde están los plátanos? Don't we have one in the home? Isn't this a little bit more exciting and capturing cultural people? Had I not stuck with that, we wouldn't have The Secret of the Plátano. But I stuck to that story. But usually what happens is when you're like too like, no, I want things like that, you'll get people that email you and say, I bow out of the story. And it's fine. But then you have to meet the person that's right for you, who believes in your story. And that's the hardest one.
Yes.
And sometimes the only person that believes in your story is your community. And that's this is where the work really begins. Because just because I'm not represented by a big publisher, I still do a lot of readings. I go to schools that represent my community. And when I go there, they're like, oh my God, like just yesterday, una señora said, oh my God, esto es Santiago, esto es Dominican Republic. Una otra persona dijo, no, es esto. It represents the community. So although the publisher said no, the books have found their homes with their community.
Yeah.
I think this is a bigger conversation of when will the rest of publishing as well as media will catch up, you know?
Absolutely. And a lot of what you're saying also reminds me that you've referred to yourself as a hybrid author.
Yes.
At times. First of all, what does that mean for those not familiar with the term? And also, what goes into being a hybrid author?
Yeah. So a hybrid author is a person who has experience in traditional publishing and also as an indie publisher, and then acts as their own publishing company. So what happens is you have opportunities that you're not represented by an agent. And usually you want to be represented by an agent because an agent is supposed to have a lot of connections to put you out there. But the truth is, the wrong agent is the right agent to let you know that there's no right agents. You're still the biggest promoter of your work. And that's where we have hybrid authors. when an author hasn't found an agent, they become their publishing houses. They become the best at pitching to not only organizations and publishing houses, but communicating the stories to the people they need to get to. So what happens is that you're telling people, I'm writing a story about, and I'll give it an example. When I was writing this book, Annalise's Determined and Happy Dazzle, the reason this book came
And it's about ADHD.
and it's about ADHD. This book came about because a couple of teachers were like, you have a daughter that has ADHD and you haven't written about that. And we have a school that has X amount of students that have this, and the parent community is resistant. And we know that you being part of the community, you could help them embrace that. And I'm like, well, no, because it's my daughter. Oh, no, because this and that. I was pushing it, but guess what? My community started pitching to me. When are you going to write a story about this? When are you going to do this? So that's how the pitch kind of works. It's both ways. Listen to what your community needs. Write the story. They knew this story was going to come authentically to me because it's about my daughter. And I wrote this story. And I have to admit, the first person that read the manuscript was my daughter because I wanted to get her okay about writing this story. And when I wrote the story, she told me, Ma, but that wasn't you. You were like freaking out when they told you I was ADHD. I'm like, well, don't worry about that.
We've grown.
We've grown. We've evolved. But that's the point. Like, that's the book becomes then a tool for the parent to use and saying, like, you know what? Yes, I could freak out. We could freaking freak out together. But then we don't have a tool to kind of say, like, what should be, like, the okay amount to freak out and understand what's going on. Because what the school was saying, and I say the school because it was many schools that were approaching me about this, is that there's students that have, they're highly impulsive, highly talkative in class, having a hard time paying attention to classroom sessions, and they're just really active. And parents were like, oh no, ellos son chiquito. That's what happens when they're chiquito. And that could be true.
Or les falta disciplina.
Or yeah. See, that could be true. But then if there's moments that some kids stay still and the other child does not, that's when the teachers start, like, documenting, like, getting a little bit more, like, telling the families, like, hey, we've noticed that your child struggles with A, B, C, D, E. Does that happen at home? And sometimes you'll have parents that will admit, yes, I see that at home. Or some parents are like, yo no sé de lo que tú me estás hablando, tú estás loco, or something. And that's fine. That's all fine. This is part of the human experience. Because we are also like children when it comes to raising our own kids. Like, we really grow up with the kids. So what happened was that I wrote the story. How I wished I would have handled it. And I'm being honest, because that was hard. Hearing something like, they think my child has, like, this label, and what does that label mean? And I just, like, flipped it. Because, yes, you know what? My daughter now is in Temple. She's still highly impulsive, highly talkative, the life of a party, just, like, the most, like, she's a volcano. She's still my volcano.
That's beautiful. What a beautiful way to say it, honestly.
She's still ADHD, but, like, she's succeeding. And I think I didn't write this story until she was almost graduating high school because I was still processing everything she needs. And what happened was I wrote the story, presented it to schools, and teachers were like, oh my God, que Dios te bendiga. Like, we really needed this. Because now, like, the conversations are different. Oh my God, yes. My child is acting like A, B, C, D, E. And, like, the story doesn't say this is how you diagnose. This is not what it's about. The story is about, if you hear a diagnosis, you could deal with the diagnosis, wrestle with the diagnosis, but your child's still your child. You're going to embrace the child.
And you're not alone.
Exactly. And that's the whole point.
In situations where you don't know how to handle it, you're also freaking out because you're human. Like, you're not alone.
And the school doesn't change its approach. They still love the child. They just have to cater to your child because the diagnosis is learning how to learn the world around you differently, because the child needs that guidance, because when they're in college, guess what? They still need to learn. And when they're in a job, that's it. There's no more hand holding. They have to have the tools that prepare them all the way to have a job, to do things on their own.
Yeah. To go back to the balance of
yeah.
being self-published or going with the publisher and really sticking to your guns, right? And knowing the worth of the work that you're doing.
Yes.
Talk about what it does take to be self-published. You know, I know that you've had works like Bachatica that are completely self-funded. So talk about the behind the scenes of financially, creatively, emotionally, all of these things that go into account, because I'm sure there are misconceptions from the outside looking in of, you're an established author, you must be thriving. And that can be true, but that doesn't mean that there are hardships no longer on the table. So talk about that.
Yeah, so thank you for bringing Bachatica. So Bachatica, I wrote that story. I had pitched it. The feedback from publishers is like, I don't understand that genre of dance, and why is it so, like, why do we need to tell this story, right? So I worked on the manuscript for a while. I kept editing. And then I self-funded the illustration. Illustrations cost anywhere from $3,000 to $5,000. A good illustrator, you'll know how to pick them. They have to look commercially like equal to like traditional.
And I'm sure that comes with experience, right?
And that comes from experience from picking it. And I have to be very honest, most publishers do not favor AI. I know people use AI, but you could tell what looks like AI-ish, and you know, and even I myself have fallen victim to finding an artist who claims they're an artist and it's AI. So you have to get like smarter that. So if you want to create your own book that is as equal to any like the Scholastics or the big publishing houses, the big five, you have to look at what the kind of books they're producing. So then I got an editor. I got two. One of the editors, she's actually a personal friend. And what I did was like, and her name is Conchetta, so shout out to her. I'm like, Conchetta, mi amor, please look at this. What is it missing? Come on, tú tienes unos ojitos bonito. I want you to see it. Like I kept like just like schmoozing her. She looked it over and she gave me some great feedback. You know, you have to switch the story you're writing over 3 times to see what is the best way this story should start. Should it start like you're laying the scene, or should it start right when it's in chaos? Most publishers like it right when it's in chaos. And there's a fine balance, but that comes with experience, right? But then let's say if I didn't have Conchetta, I will have to pay someone. Some editors for children's book charge as little as $180, and some of them a lot, even as $1,000. I've seen those prices. Those are hefty prices. And once, let's say you have the editor, you have the illustrations, then it comes to paying 2 designers. That's an additional expense. It could range anywhere from $500 to, again, over $1,000. Wow. And then after that, you have to buy an ISBN number. What is an ISBN number? This beautiful little thing to mark that this book is something that is a product for sale, and you have to register that. Then you have to pay for the registration with the state. So when you start adding it up, a book, to do a good book, even if you're like, let's say we're going to cut a lot of expenses and do it like with the bare bones, let's say the bare bones, you're still spending like a good $5,000. Wow. Most publishers don't break even until after the first 6 months that the book is done. So publishers, that's why, like when you publish a book, if you notice, most publishers try to do the pre-sale. They spend 2 months on a pre-sale, a great pre-sale. They want to try to sell at least 1,000 off the rip, right? And they give discounts, because the book is really like the entryway for a lot of authors to use this book as for speaking engagements, for author visits, and things of that nature. So that's when the money starts coming in a little bit more stable, and like there's more opportunities. But to me, like the author business is a hard business, and you have to love it. You really have to love it. You have to be a people person. Yeah. You have to be good with kids. And I think one of the things I learned about the kids is like the kids are hungry for stories, because the part of school is that school gets tiring, and school is a lot. And then let's say if you're by yourself, like, and you're a child by yourself, now with a lot of support, kids get lost in the books and they love it. So if you make the books relatable, something that they can say like, oh, this reminds me of something, you won. If you make them excited that they want to learn again. There was a little girl yesterday that I'm not really proud of this. She was crying because she wanted more times to play with the books. That's why she was crying. And I was just so sad. I'm like, okay, the teacher's going to email everything so you could get access to the books virtually. And although I don't monetize from this, all my books are available on YouTube for free. Like everyone could consume it for free. And some of them are paired with online games to make it fun. Because I believe like books should be like you read it, you see it, and then you play with it. Kids, that's how they learn still.
I love that you mentioned that.
Play, and you have fun.
I really do, because something that I applaud about your work is it really is holistic. It's multi-format storytelling, and the experience doesn't just end at the end of the book.
No.
You know, you mentioned the books being an entryway for authors, just like they're entryways for children,
Yes.
you know, to want more, to read more stories like the ones that you're telling. So talk about why it was so important for you to expand that experience beyond just the books. You started talking about that, but tell me more.
Yeah, so I didn't get into the book videos, animating them, if it wasn't for my husband. My husband was like, oh, this will be perfect as an animation. Don't you think so? And just picture a woman like with pajamas on and her hairs and her moños all over and like probably coffee stains, going like, are you kidding me? I just finished this. Like we should be proud of this. And he's like, no, I could see this as animation. He just kept putting that seed in my heart. And that's why I feel like I will forever love this man. This man, we push ourselves, we like test our limits. But I think one thing that he will not give up, he's like, I don't want you to take the easy way out. I know you want to do more. Like, he knew my heart. And I think I will forever be grateful for someone. Because I think that's like the real test of like knowing someone so well that you know their future and what they're good at. So he pushed me. So I found someone, and this is funny, they didn't animate. So I challenged my designer at the time, Victor Colon, that he's like a really wonderful designer, to, hey, can you figure out animation for Pequeña Maria, Little Maria? And we started with that one. He did it. He didn't want to animate. I think I like really pushed him because I wanted to do that animation experience with someone I trusted. I just didn't want to give money to anyone who will not animate it, knowing like what I was looking for. He's Puerto Rican too. So I think it mattered to me giving money within the community, because that's another thing. If you think there's barely any writers that get opportunities, illustrators as well. And then everyone who adds to the book. Think about it like a film. Anyone who adds to the contribution of the film. So then he helped with the animation. And then I noticed that all my books should be animated. And that was my husband's goal. All of them should be animated. So then in the pandemic, I think it was around 2021 at the end, I had pitched to PBS. What they did was take all my Maria books and they put it like in one of these specials that they had called Chat and Learn, and they did that. Little did I know that PBS actually shared it with their local stations at other places like in North Carolina and places like that. And I had people from Australia reaching out to me. Vimos a Pequeña Maria. I was so happy when I saw this, that. And I was just like, so they syndicated it throughout. Now, did I get paid for that? No, PBS. You did not pay me.
I was just about to ask.
You did not pay me, but I was still happy for the opportunity to share my work. And it did gain visibility of the work, you know? Now, and there's a couple of things that I want to admit to that. If you think publishing is hard, now let's look at animations. Let's look at films. The Latino population that dominate the space is less than 3%. At least that was a couple years back. Wow. I'm pretty sure now is dismal. So think about it. So who are the people that are having the opportunities to write these stories, make films and animations? And now think about the way that they're like reaching your families and your communities, you know?
Wow. That is very impactful, honestly. And that is a wake up call as well, because again, a constant theme of what we've been talking about is there is work being done, but it's still not enough.
It's not enough.
And I want to reflect a little bit because I wanted to ask you, how long ago did you publish your first book?
2016.
So it's been 10 years.
Yes.
First of all, happy 10th anniversary.
Thanks.
But also, I asked that to set the stage of how do you think you've evolved as an author since starting? You know, when you tackle each new book, has the process changed? Does the structure pretty much stay the same, but the content is what's different? Talk a little bit about that as well.
The process has changed because now there's more opportunities for indie authors or indie hybrid authors to monetize, right? There's a platform called Ingram Spark. Ingram Spark, actually, if you publish your book through them, you have a higher chance of your book being either in a public library, in a community bookstore, or just getting somewhere. Now, I'm going to be honest, it is heavily saturated, the industry. And children's book, although it's very coveted, it's so hard to break the mold and like stand out from the crowd. Amazon still dominates the space for books, but I think like the problem and the dangers with Amazon is that you have to understand how to like upload your work there, how to gain and be like some people what they do is they make their book for free so a lot of people could grab it and that puts you as an Amazon bestseller, or they lower the price of like for $1 so it could put you in a ranking for an Amazon bestseller. I've never done that, and I want to say why I think it's like wrong to do that because your work's still, you know,
Valuable.
it's valuable. And I understand we're doing this to get visibility, but that's because we don't own a platform or a distribution that is highlighting the work of community members. I think that's the bigger conversation that we should have. I know we're trying to find tricks to get around the TikToks and that, but it really depends on what are you trying to do. Is your goal to help literacy? And yes, monetize as well, or is your goal to make sure that these books find the right audience, get to the community, help the kids that you know that really need it? I'm not saying that my goal is not a little bit of everything, because it can be, right? It can be, and no one will judge for that. But I just want to make sure that when we're running around seeing squirrels, trying to see what's the next best thing, think about your goal. What is your goal? My goal was making educational materials that talk to kids that happen to be Hispanic and Black, happen to be representative of my community in Dominican Republic, in Washington Heights, in the Bronx, the trifecta of what makes Luz, but mostly that they feel inspired to learn.
Yeah, absolutely. How many books at this point have you put out? Because just on your, just to here with us are about like 10.
Yeah, so they're over 26.
Wow.
And from the 26, I think 23 are as short animation forms. So they're on Quayle TV, which is like another platform. And then I recently started submitting to Afroland TV. So I think my animations are going to make it to Afroland TV, which I'm like, yes. And I know people are like, I've never heard of these platforms, but you should look at these platforms. Yes, there's the Netflix, there's the Hulu, there's the Disney, but there's platforms being created to help writers, content creators, people that are doing animation and film get their work seen. Because although we love the Netflix and the Hulus and the Disney, it takes a long time for them to love us right back.
Wow. What a powerful phrase. And it's the sad reality, but it's very important to acknowledge that.
Yeah.
And I love that another constant theme of your journey is you're not going to let that stop you. You're going to find a way to do it. And I do think that's a direct reflection not only of your determination and knowing how important these stories are, but also the community around you rallying. I wanted to ask you as well, because when we had our introductory call, one of the
Yes.
many things that you mentioned was, I'd love to tap into writing novels, but I don't feel like I've graduated yet.
Yes, I said
Tell
that.
me about that, because if you ask me, granted, I am not familiar with this industry as you are more than ready. So please tell me what you meant by that.
So I joined a couple of writers groups that are virtual, just to practice my writing, make sure I'm testing different genres, and I do want to write novels. But the reason I say I haven't grown up yet. And I haven't graduated children's books because I feel like there's so much more to learn and there's so many more stories.
Yeah.
I think one of the reasons I haven't let this go, so to speak, is because I just want to see them like being picked up and acquired and seeing them as like maybe decodable books, to help kids that are dyslexic and learning how to read. I would love to see almost all of them converted into Braille and acquired. I would love to see an animation series that is actually teaching social emotional learning in a kind way, in a way that kids are like relating to those small moment experiences and seeing different friends. Because if we combat racism, people are like, oh, don't be racist. Well, that's not how it happens, right? Like, I'm not sure when it was your first time meeting a Dominican. I remember my first time meeting a Colombian. It was through a restaurant.
Really?
Yes.
My first time meeting a Dominican, this is an interesting question.
I have to ask.
I think it was a family friend.
But how old were you? You're in the hot
I
seat. How old were you?
Oh my goodness. I must have been
Were you
maybe
eating
in my teenage years.
Okay.
It wasn't like a younger self. It was like maybe like 12, 13, 14, 15 around that time.
Oh, my question to you is, wouldn't it have been different meeting a Dominican through a book?
100%.
But that's my thing.
Because it feels, I think, more intimate as well.
It is, because then you're like getting to know them. Oh my God, so you don't eat mango every 24/7. No, we do love mango 24/7.
Now that I continue to think about it, I went to school with someone who was Dominican, but I think at the time we were both trying to assimilate so much
But that's
to the world around us that when you asked me, I didn't think of that person immediately, That's so interesting.
But it's the truth. That's what happens to little kids. They know their home. They know the things they know about their home. I love my bed. I love my blanket. I love this. And then the people come, there's mommy, there's daddy, there's my friends. But then they start saying like, oh, my friends and I don't do this the same. So I uprooted my children from our neighborhood, and they go to school where none of their friends were from the Bronx at the time. None of their friends had like two different cultures represented in their home. Actually, it's actually really interesting to say my children were learning a lot because a lot of their friends were Jewish,
I grew up in a predominantly Jewish community as well,
But that's
actually.
my point. Like, they knew more about the Jewish culture, right?
Yes, it's true.
Like,
I knew what a bat and bar mitzvah was very early on.
Yeah.
And I knew about the Colombian culture, but beyond that, you really had to seek it out.
But like, the same is true, and it could be said from people from every country. So if they're not in the classroom, and which is different now, because now we're talking about predominantly white spaces, right? But the same is in reverse. I went to JFK High School. Everyone was Dominican. The majority was Puerto Rican, and then a bigger majority was Black. We all knew each other. What happens? You go to college. You meet people, you're like, the hell? Oh my God. Like, I remember, but the experience is different if we had that introduction.
Absolutely.
Then you're not struggling to assimilate. You're not struggling, like, there's like these awkward conversations that happen when people don't understand the whole hanging out process.
100%. And back to books being an entry point, I think that's
it.
Just as powerful as a movie, as a show, as other types of shared experiences through storytelling. Before we close out, I want to ask you two last things. And the first one is, what do you want both children and their parents and families to take away from the many stories that you've written and you will continue to write?
Oh, thank you for putting that in the air, because every now and then I'm like, this is my last book. I'm going to jump off George W. Washington's bridge for this. I don't know. One of the things that I want people to know, because I do author readings, and I always start the author readings asking, and I want to challenge everyone that views this episode and sees, what is an author? The kids and parents will say it's a person who writes a book, a storyteller, someone who author illustrates, all these little things around this genre, right? But an author is also someone that's learning how to read. An author is someone also that's learning how to write. An author is also someone that's learning to solve problems through a book. An author is also someone who just sits there and do nothing and just observe the world. So with that in mind, we are all writers, and we're all creators, and we're all authors of our lives. So I want people to walk away with the message that, yes, I self-funded a lot of these stories because I wanted to put them as tools, but there's no one stopping you from creating your own tools to make life better for you, for your family, and the world around you, because it is about connection.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. And to close us out, I want to ask you a two-part question. The first is, can you give us an inside scoop or exclusive of what we can look forward to, whether it's another book, another project that you have in the works, and also a dream that you want to speak into manifestation, something that you want to attract and you're actively working towards?
Yes. So I'm working on my book called I See Love, which highlights, and it's in honor of my cousin Mei Ling Wong, and also my dad's side of the family, that is the Wong family. I want to make sure that people know that I am part Chinese through my father, and I love him so much, and I want to honor that. And also how the Dominican Chinese culture intertwines. Although we don't, in the story, it's not highlighted so strongly about that, but I do highlight it in pieces of it through the illustration and the people that represent it. And then the thing I want to manifest is to get to move from my current home to a bigger space. Like all New Yorkers, we will love bigger spaces.
And you might be able to work more comfortably in a bigger space as well.
Yes.
Amazing. Well, listen, I could speak with you all day. I really
love it.
believe in your work. I
Thank
love
you.
that you are championing for the stories of our community
Yes.
and not letting all of the challenges that come in the process stop you. I commend you for your hard work and for your
Thank you.
passion. I support you.
Oh.
Cuenta conmigo, de verdad. We spoke about community our
Amén.
entire conversation, and consider me a part of yours and vice versa. Thank you so much
Likewise.
for sharing your story. I wish you all the success that I'm sure is coming your way. And thank you all for listening and watching. Until next time.